With one swing of the bat, Tim Elko proved why he should have been called up weeks ago, and let's discuss his immediate impact on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I write for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, it's fitting that Tim Elko's first career big league hit was a home run, and let's discuss how his 3-run shot made a major impact on yesterday's game, and how he's also impacting Andrew Vaughn. Then it sounds like the White Sox are willing to take even less than what they were looking for in the offseason for Luis Robert Jr. That's according to a recent report from USA Today's Bob Nightingale. And finally, it's a Minor League Monday report as MLB Pipeline released its updated top 100 overall rankings and top 30 for each team. I'll go over how many top 100 prospects the Sox now have and the shakeup in their top 30. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So Tim Elko has arrived, and on his sixth career at bat, he finally made his presence felt. He did what all of us has been fighting for, and that is he hit a massive 3-run shot off of Sandy Alcantara to break a 1-1 tie as the Sox went on to win 4-2 yesterday and take the weekend series over the Miami Marlins. So now the Sox have won back-to-back weekend series at home, and does it sort of kind of hurt the tankathon, race when you take a series over a fellow bad team? Sure. But do I care? No. Because in this context, this is why you bring up Tim Elko. Because as I've been pining for, I'm sure you've been pining for, at least win more games than you did in 2024 and give us something to watch, like, say, Tim Elko hitting bombs. And he did just that. Now, to the Cubs fans on social media, stay in your lane, okay? That's the first thing. I'm sorry. Keep my name, keep my team's name out your mouth. Because saying that all Elko is another Matt Mervis, okay, but you're totally ignoring the context of our older hyped prospects tend to at least give us a month or a summer of joy before they turn into pumpkins. I mean, we had a month of Yermin Mercedes in 2021. We had that summer of Matt Davidson and Daniel Palka in 2018. So we're going to be okay. All right, we're fine. You want to mock us for hyping up a 26-year-old former 10th round prospect like Cubs fans were doing with Matt Mervis? Fine. Stay in your lane, though, okay? You got plenty of things to worry about. And plus the Sox, they're not contending for a couple of seasons. So I get where Cubs fans are mocking, oh, Matt Mervis. Well, you guys were trying to contend, and Matt Mervis didn't help you. Tim Elko, we're just hoping he gets us through the bridge years. And that's fine. That's okay. Two things can be true. So just stay in your lane, okay? That's my PSA. But what I'm looking for Tim Elko from here on out is just hit home runs, make your teammates better. Prove you can be a power-hitting first baseman that this team could use through the build. And even if he hits 210 through 240, I'll be fine with that, so long as it comes with 20 to 30 home runs. That's why I could live with I think he had 2 strikeouts over the weekend. That's fine. As long as he's crushing 3-run shots, that helps the Sox at least win more games than they won in 2024. All thumbs up. And when it comes to making his teammates better, notice the weekend Andrew Vaughn had. Because the news of Elko coming up leaked out just a bit before first pitch. Shout out to Vinny Duber. He's been on the show in the past. He's now, I think he's working part-time with the Sun-Times after obviously being unceremoniously laid off by CHGO. I think he's covering weekends. He's bouncing back and forth between the Cubs and the Sox to give their beat writers a weekend off. But he leaked out the news that Tim Elko was going to get called up, and that was on Friday, just before first pitch. And what does Vaughn do? Crushes a home run on Friday, and then he does one on Saturday with Elko in the lineup. And he also hit an RBI single on Sunday. Now, obviously, he still had some horrible at-bats. Like on Saturday, I believe it was bases loaded. Or no, it was Friday. One of the games where they were winning bases loaded. The Sox had a chance to even blow it out. blow the game out even more. And Luis Robert Jr. and him both strike out in horrendous fashion. And he's always going to, I'm just convinced, he's always just going to be a one step forward, two steps back guy and grab a bat and kill this rally type of guy. That's just who he is. But however, if Elko's presence is what it takes for Vaughn to finally realize, hey, I need to put some more work into my game. Allegedly, there's allegations from former Sox prospect Tyler Osick. He had that on X, I think about 2 weeks ago, and I talked about it. 670 The Score had a bunch of details on it. That he's not exactly the hardest worker. So if Elko's presence is what it takes to get Vaughn to work, then I'm all for it. Because while I've been an Elko truther, and I'm in the Elko camp, I am also in the camp of let's see if Andrew Vaughn can increase his trade value to beyond being a player to be named later. Two things can be true. You can obviously want the Sox to move forward with Tim Elko, but you can also want this to push Andrew Vaughn to be the best version of himself so they can get someone back in return when they trade him. Because of the team Vaughners, in this debate, you're going to lose. Because the Sox only have just 1 year of club control left. He's too inconsistent to extend. Also, he's not special enough to extend, and he's not special enough to take up precious financial resources, especially since they are so limited. This season is proof of that. When $5.8 million went to him, that instead could have went to the bullpen, or even $2 million could have went to Gavin Sheets, who's still hitting very well for the San Diego Padres, and then $3.8 million could have went to the bullpen. So that's why Andrew Vaughn will eventually have to go. That is why this exercise for the rest of the season, hopefully, because, let's hope Tim Elko keeps hitting home runs, is can he be a cheap, viable option at first base through this build? And can he even be beyond that? It can't hurt to say, hey, maybe this guy's just a late bloomer. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong to actually dream, okay? Because especially, as I pointed out on a short over the weekend on YouTube, say Elko is just a viable 1 to 2 F4 player at first base who hits 20 to 30 home runs. You can have that for cheap through the rest of the decade because he's under club control until I believe he's going to be 31 or 32. That's a massive boon for a team that obviously spends limited amount of money. But, I know if you're going to say, well, you got bias. Yeah, I am an Elko truther. I've admitted to it. But I also was once banging the drum for Andrew Vaughn. I had enough. But if this gets Andrew Vaughn to at least get the trade return to be a viable prospect who could be a viable reliever or even a William Bergolla type prospect, I'm fine for it. You had to send a message to Vaughn that he's replaceable. Something had to be sent. And if they weren't going to demote him, if they weren't going to give him the Spencer Torkelson treatment, then something else had to be done. And it looks like it's working. He hit 2 home runs and he had a big RBI single to get the game tied at 1-1. That's huge. That's big. Okay. So, and I think that's what everybody was trying to say was, obviously you could have Elko and Vaughn in the lineup together. You just switch. Who's going to be the DH? Who's going to be the first baseman? But there is unintended consequences, as my guy Bez of On Tap Sportsnet has pointed out on X, at Beyond Bez Pen. It means reduced playing time for Miguel Vargas, Lenyn Sosa, and Josh Rojas. Now, obviously, it's not the end of the world that Josh Rojas is not going to get at-bats or he's going to get limited. And Lenyn Sosa, I keep saying, just ride it out until he eventually turns into a pumpkin. Although maybe he is just nothing more than, hey, maybe he is a 1F4 player. And the White Sox need more raised floor players. I don't think Lenyn Sosa is your long-term for second baseman, but if he can get you through the build, fine. Because again, he's under club control and he should be relatively cheap for the next couple of years. And Vargas, yes, you do need to get him into the lineup every day or at least 5 to 6 days a week. Although he's dealing with a sore ankle from that play in Kansas City on Thursday where he made a nice play, but looks like he twisted his ankle, or I think it was Wednesday. Either way, obviously came up a little hurt, was able to finish the game. But with the White Sox having an off day today, they were trying to give him and Luis Robert Jr., who we'll get to in the next segment, some time off. So my thought, though, is Vargas is now your third baseman, at least 5 to 6 days a week. You rotate Rojas in there when you give Vargas a day off, and then you just rotate him with Sosa at second. And on the days Vaughn is playing first, Sosa comes in as a late inning defensive replacement if you have the lead. That's just kind of what I would be doing. It's not ideal because obviously in terms of if you want the White Sox to at least win 50 to 62 games, although again, I would say put it at 50 to 58 games, then you still want Sosa in the lineup more just because he's at least hitting for now. I mean, once he stops hitting, then get him out of here. But you obviously cannot reduce Vargas's at-bats. His swing adjustment, at the very least, should make him a raised floor third baseman. I mean, Fangraphs projects that he will finish with a 1.5 F4, which, again, the Sox need more of those guys. They do need some more raised floor guys. If they can get a 1.5 or 2 F4 from Miguel Vargas for the next couple of seasons, that's a win. Also, this is just a short-term problem, as the hope is Vaughn and Rojas are traded for something at the deadline. And then you roll with Vargas at third, Maidroth at short, Sosa at second, and Elko at first. Is it a flashy infield? Not really. But it could be one that gets you through the build until higher ceiling players that hopefully get drafted in this year's draft are ready. And that's what you want to find out are some of these guys going to be part of the long term? Because at least the ceiling for Maidroth and Elko, I would say, is they could be viable players on the 2027 team. They could. I'm not saying they're going to be the best players, but they could be viable, raising your floor, making you a better team. Same with Vargas. Sosa's the only guy that I would say, he still has to do a lot to convince me that he could actually be your long-term second baseman. But at least you want to find out because, again, all four of those guys, very cheap. And until the Ishbias take over, you want to have, not money, financial resources tied up into the infield. And again, hopefully the White Sox take a high ceiling shortstop with the 10th pick. Hopefully Caleb Bonemer, who I'll talk about in the third segment, is ready by 2027 or 2028. That type of stuff. But at least, show that these guys can help you get through this build period. That's fine. And I'm not going to hammer the Sox for not calling up Elko sooner. The key is they came to their senses and they called him up. Well, USA Today's Bob Nightingale had a little nugget in his Sunday notebook about Luis Robert Jr.'s trade status. And let's discuss it being a signal that the White Sox are willing to take even pennies on the dollar. And that's next on Locked On White Sox. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you just stop managing your money and you start building wealth. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so Bob Nightingale got the latest scoop on the Luis Robert Jr. trade front. And it sounds like the White Sox are willing to take even less than what the front office was demanding in the offseason. Remember, in the offseason, the rumors were 2 top 5 prospects. That's what the White Sox were looking for from a team. 2 top 5 prospects. No one met that demand because GM Chris Getz does need a calendar. Okay? He kept thinking LRJ's value was more towards that great 2023 production he put up when he was an all-star, MVP candidate, stayed healthy the entire year. When the rest of the league was like, obviously that gives him value, but he's an injury-prone player that is inconsistent. Okay, Chris? Like, yeah, you're going to need to come down lower on that price. Office Space, one of the greatest movies of all time. And while it is good the Sox have decided to roll the dice and keep him on the roster, hoping he can rebuild his value, his slow start as well, likely kept it where it was in the offseason. And he was out of the lineup on Saturday and Sunday with knee soreness. So it's obviously nothing that will require an IL stint, according to the team, but you can bet a team on the other line is going to be like, look, gets hurt. I'm not going to give up that much for the injury risk. He's already got sore knees. Again, Swaggy McNo-Legs shows up for the White Sox. And according to Nightingale's report, it sounds like the White Sox are coming around to what the rest of the league is willing to offer. And that's probably a top 15 prospect or reclamation project. Because that's what it sounds like the White Sox have been tied to now, according to the last two Bob Nightingale reports. So here's what Bob is reporting. This is a little nugget. You got to scroll all the way down on usatoday.com. The Chicago White Sox finally are starting to get some inquiries on center fielder Luis Robert, with the New York Mets recently among the teams checking in and showing interest. The White Sox are eyeing 23-year-old Mets starting prospect Blade Tidwell as part of the package in return. So first of all, another Bob Nightingale fail that he always does is misidentifying players. It's Blade Tidwell. And first of all, that is a cool name. I mean, don't get me wrong. Blade Tidwell, that is one of the coolest names I've ever heard in my life. Problem is, he is the Mets' 15th ranked prospect according to MLB Pipeline. So now you've got reports from the Sox going from possibly getting one of the Reds' top 5 prospects in the offseason had they agreed to pay some salary, but that didn't happen because Getz got greedy and tried for 2 top 5 prospects, and the Reds were like, nah, baby, nah. Then to Nightingale reporting talks were tabled with the Dodgers regarding a deal involving James Ottman and another top prospect to Blade Tidwell. So you can't even get a reclamation project for Luis Robert Jr. That shows you how Getz completely overplayed his hand. And honestly, if that's the best you can do as a pitching prospect who only has one pitch rated above average and an ERA that just keeps going up as he goes through the ranks, and his ERA, I believe, is at 4.48 right now at AAA, well, you definitely overplayed your hand, Chris. And obviously, for those that are like, well, they can't get pitchers. They don't need pitchers. Well, they did just have a rash of Tommy John surgeries to their young hurlers. So it means they can never acquire enough pitching. You do have a draft 2 months away to take care of bringing in another infusion of pitching talent. So that's the thing where I look at the context too, where I'm on the side of, obviously you want to try to get the best trade return for Luis Robert Jr. because he's your last talented player that should yield you top tier talent, even if it's top 15 players. Obviously not ideal. But I also am in the camp of, you should try to get positional players because you have a draft strategy. You've been following it. You have another draft where you can infuse more young arms, and that's what you should be doing. But you need position players, since right now, in terms of impact bats, you got Kyle Teal, Braden Montgomery, and then a whole lot of question marks after that. I mean, do you have some talented guys? Yeah. Brian Ramos, Jacob Gonzalez, Rico Nishida, Sam Antonacci, Jarrell Perez, William Regola. These are guys that I actually would say you should be excited about, but they might be just raised floor players. You also need raised ceiling guys, and right now you got 2 of them. Maybe George Wolcott, but the jury is still out because he is off to a season-starting slump. So you got 2.5 maybe. You need more. And that's why you should be leveraging Luis Robert Jr. for some more impact bats potentially. However, I can't put this all on Getz for overplaying Luis Robert Jr. because the injury and the inconsistent play, that's on Luis Robert Jr. Chris Getz isn't in the batting box, still swinging at pitches down and in. Chris Getz isn't the one that when there is a chance to do damage, he's not just flailing, trying to swing as hard as he can at anything. Because yes, Luis Robert Jr., I think, has done better at the plate in terms of plate discipline, but he went from totally inconsistent to just inconsistent. Okay. That still can be that's still a problem. and him still hitting under 200, that's also on Robert. About the only thing that I think Getz could do right now is just keep sending tape of the couple of games where he's basically won a game still on his own with his bat, with his glove, and with his speed on the base paths, as that would be a reminder to contenders. He can do that for you, and maybe he can do that more if he's down on the pecking order of stars. Because I'm still convinced that Luis Robert Jr., highly talented player, but he needs to be down the pecking order of stars. Because you see, he kind of presses at the plate when he's got a chance to do some serious damage, when there's like bases loaded. That's when he completely goes back to being that player that we've seen where he has got no plate discipline. It's usually where he's got the most plate discipline is either where there's, one or two guys, just like one guy on base or no guys on base. Then you're starting to see, obviously, the much more improved plate disciplined Luis Robert Jr. It's when there's still chances to do damage. He's just flailing and swinging at everything he can. But if Blade Tidwell is the best you can get right now, then keep rolling the dice and keep him until the trade deadline with the hope that he stays healthy and does produce better at the plate. And if it is July 29th and LRJ is still hitting between 200 and 220, and then if Tidwell is the best you can do, okay, you entertain it, because if he's hitting 200 or 220 by July, that's a sign of a bad season. Okay, that's usually the sign of an awful season. And unless you make something dramatically, unless you dramatically change something at the plate, like what Andrew Benintendi did last year, you're going to have a bad season. And if he continues to have a bad season, then you're not paying him his $20 million option. You're paying him $2 million to go away. So unless July 29th, if he's still hitting 200 and 220 without having 25 home runs or 50 stolen bases on July 29th, and Blade Tidwell is the best you can do, then you trade him. But otherwise, taking pennies on the dollar for him right now because you're terrified that he's going to be, injured, that still would be organizational negligence, because you still have time. You still have time for things to get better. Okay? Right now, the reports are any team trying to jump the market is not going to give you a better deal. So now move to the next, point where you can potentially trade them to get a good return, and that is the trade deadline. Well, MLB Pipeline rolled out their latest top 100 and updated top 30 prospects for each team. Sox have a prospect who is actually no longer considered a top 100 player, and let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell varieties. It's a perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. My go-to flavors are roasted and salted and the honey roasted. The roasted and salted is great because it has that perfect blend of that roasted flavor, but just enough salt where I don't need a gallon of water to wash them down. And the honey roasted, talk about a just great flavor. It's an explosion of honey goodness. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options, they're a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. Hope you had a good weekend. To the mothers that listen to this show, hope you had a great Mother's Day. I ended up coming down with a cold again, or some sort of sinus infection. I don't know. I was feeling terrible yesterday. Slept most of the day. I feel terrible for my wife, that I basically could not give her the full day off and, kind of entertain my daughter. I'll try to make it up to her, this week. Otherwise, kind of a low-key weekend for me. Well, the White Sox have just 5 top 100 prospects, and it's not because someone graduated from prospect status. MLB Pipeline revealed its updated top 100 prospects, and, well, they only have 5 now. The other 2 biggest pieces of news is the Sox only did not get another prospect that Baseball America thinks is in the top 100 in MLB Pipelines, and they have the one of their prospects is among the biggest leapers. So those are basically the 3 biggest news. They now have 5 top 100 prospects, as Colson Montgomery went from being the number 39 prospect in all of baseball to being out of the top 100 as his fall from grace continues. The other news is obviously they have one of the biggest leapers, and they just don't agree with Baseball America and Caleb Bodemer. In terms of Colson Montgomery, this should not shock anyone, as technically the Sox thought his struggles were so bad that he shouldn't even be playing minor league games. Okay, so this, like, oh my gosh, you went from 39 to nothing, 39 out of the top 10. Well, yeah, the White Sox agree with you. They don't even have him playing minor league games for a week. He had to go to swing school. Now, hopefully working with director of hitting Ryan Fuller in Arizona gets Colson rebooted. And I'm not ready to abandon ship, as I do think going to swing school is a good process. I think like that should be built into their process. If they have any guy that they're committed to, that they've invested a lot in, picks 1 through 4, overslotted, former, guys that have been highly regarded that start to struggle, you should add this to your process of, hey, let's just take them out of some games, let's get them back, let's reset and try something different and then put them back in. So I'm fine with that. But with that comes consequences, like the outside perception of you no longer are a highly regarded, you no longer have a highly regarded player. And here's what MLB Pipeline wrote up, and I fully agree with it. Montgomery was already coming off a down year at AAA Charlotte in 2024, 214, 329, 381 slash line, but still had the look of a potential power plus hitter considering he was just 22 for the entire season. Returning to the International League this spring, he got off to an even tougher start with a 149 average and a 41.7% strikeout rate in 23 games. And the White Sox moved him back to the Arizona complex for an in-season reset. He could still play a big part for the rebuild on the south side, but we want to see the 2021 first rounder perform consistently again before putting him back on the list. And that's fair. That's completely fair. Because again, the White Sox were like, you are not good enough to even play in AAA anymore and make in-season adjustments. You have to be pulled off the road, basically, and be sent to Arizona. And we got to hit control out the lead on you. Now, Colson has played in a couple complex league games last week. Overall, the numbers, though, not so great. 167 average with a 439 OPS. But he did reach base in all 5 games he's played. And obviously, you're not going to get, just immediate impact results overnight. I believe the plan is to send him back to AAA Charlotte this week. But honestly, it can't hurt to have him maybe play a few more complex league games. Just ease him back in. Can't hurt to give him another week. Right now you basically have now said the timeline for Colson is to be determined. We probably shouldn't expect him to be in the big leagues right away. I wouldn't expect him to be in the big leagues by June. I don't even know if we're going to see him this season now. Maybe if he gets on a hot streak. And then in terms of where he falls in the organization rankings, he is now number 6. Brandon Montgomery rose 10 spots in the top 100. He went from 48 to 38, so that makes him one of the biggest leapers. Makes sense given the hot start he's off to. He had 5 multi-hit games last week, and I'm not sure he will be at high A ball much longer. Again, there's the cold in the sinus there. He checks in at number 4 in terms of the Sox prospect rankings. In terms of the rest of the top 100 prospects for the Sox, and then this would be also their top 5. Noah Schultz is number 13, obviously number 1 overall for the Sox. Kyle Teal, the Sox second-ranked prospect, he's actually number 28 overall in terms of the top 100. Hagen Smith, number 30, and then Edgar Caro is number 58. He would then be your 5th-ranked prospect for the Sox. However, if Caro stays up with the big league club, at some point he will obviously be graduated. And that's why it would have been nice to see MLB Pipeline agree with Baseball America and have Caleb Bodemer in the top 100. Their rankings came out on May 7th, and they got the Sox second-round pick from last year as their number 93 prospect. MLB Pipeline does not agree, as he's not in their top 100. And also some services have Grant Taylor in their top 100, but not MLB Pipeline. They did not put the pitcher in their top 100 either. Remember, this is kind of the good and the bad. The one reason why MLB Pipeline has some weight is that over the others is that it's simply free. And they do have some smart people running it. But with prospects, everyone has different opinions. It's just like scouts. Every scout has a different opinion. Some, for example, see a deficiency as fixable, and it's not that big of a deal, and they look more at the potential. Others see a deficiency as a kiss of death. Others see something as potential as not being that, high to be impressed with. Some folks prefer power over bat to ball, that type of stuff. So that's why it's not, on one end, it's like, okay, you would like to see MLB Pipeline agree just because it's the one service that is free and accessible, and it's basically owned by baseball. So sometimes it can be a little skewed. But on the other end, just know people are not going to agree all the time. It's fine. Baltimore, though, is off to a 275, 409, 442 slash line to start at Low A Kannapolis. Since he's 19, it can't hurt to keep him there for maybe a couple more months. Maybe you move him up to high A1. Sam Antonacci and Jarrell Perez are ready to move up to double A. I would kind of do what they did with George Wolcole and just keep him at Low A Kannapolis, unless obviously he just continues to rake. If he keeps putting up these numbers and not striking out like George Wolcole was, it can't hurt to get him to Winston-Salem. But I would move him up as you move, Perez and Antonacci, who play basically shortstop. I would move him up. Baltimore is considered the Sox 11th best prospect. In terms of the rest of the top 10, not much changed. Taylor's 7th, Mydroth 8th, as he still hasn't graduated from prospect status. Jairo Uriarte 9th, George Wolcole 10th. The other major note is pitcher Christian Upper. He makes his top 30 debut at number 18. He's an impressive pitcher with a 2.42 ERA at Low A, and I believe a relative of Upper, I think it's Upper. Let future Sox know he's actually getting the bump up to high A, so good for him, as that young man has some impressive pitches. So let's not waste those limited bullets at Low A. My only other critique of the Sox top 30 prospects is some of these guys are out for the year. I just don't think should be listed anymore, especially those guys that are out for the year with Tommy John surgery. Kai Bush, Mason Adams, Juan Carla, and Blake Larson. Even Alexander Albertus, he's still out with that broken leg. Don't rank them because they're not helping this year. Great, they're talented, but they're not even helping a minor league team. You can't even look at any production. If they're lost for the year, take them off the list. You can always put them back on when they're active. And I'm not doing this to be cruel, but I just want a list of 30, the 30 best prospects that are currently playing. That's what I would prefer. That's what I would say to all of these prospects lists. If they're out for the year with a major injury, take them off the list. You can always put them back on. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with who's been the best and the worst for the team through the quarter mark of the season. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding Tim Elko making an impact in yesterday's game, and on Andrew Vaughn, the latest on Luis Robert Jr.'s trade status, and the Minor League Monday Report. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.